Hello, my dear friends of the Perl 6 group. I write to you with a question about language development. So, this is the problem. English is ambiguous. Like this sentence, time flies like an arrow, can be interpreted in two different ways. One of them is time being the noun, flies like an arrow. So the verb here is flies. Or another way is time flies like an arrow, meaning you want to measure how much time flies, do shit, and you want to do it like an arrow. So, given the ambiguity of language, then translation becomes a difficult task, at least for computers. So, if you want to translate this book to Spanish, maybe you will say el tiempo vuela como una flecha, meaning time flies like an arrow, or mide el tiempo de la mosca como una flecha, meaning measure the amount of time the flies, like the flying flies that are like insects, fly like an arrow. In any case, we don't know which is the right translation. I mean, statistical analysis tells us it's the first one, but still, can we be sure? So, the idea is to make a mini language where people can express their thoughts in a way that looks like a tree. So there is no parsing ambiguity as to how the tree was constructed. So here the author will write inflect fly third, meaning the verb fly gets inflected into the third person like flies. Time is the first parameter of the verb, and then the second parameter is the verb predicate, which is flies like an arrow, so similar to arrow. So similar to is like a made up thing that I do to indicate like. And the idea is that this language can be rendered into English, but it could also be rendered into other languages. So, this Lisp expression I hope will be a lot less ambiguous than the English from the beginning, and this will allow us to theoretically at least automatically and precisely translate to many languages, and thereby will reduce the cost of publishing materials by 1 or 2 orders of magnitude. So the idea is that instead of writing one book for English readers, you will write one book for everybody in the world, and we will have one renderer for each language. So for this tool to kind of exist, then another component here that I forgot to draw. I'm sorry, guys. Another component here will be the author will write the Lisp stuff in the user interface, and at the same time, he could see the real-time rendering of what he wrote into English, so that he can see that whatever he wrote makes sense in his own language, and also he could probably see some renders into other languages, so like English, French, German, or whatever. So he could see in real time how these sentences are being translated. And if he actually speaks English, French, and German, which some authors might, then he could see immediately that what he did either makes sense or doesn't in these languages. Now, if the languages are different enough, so instead of choosing English, French, and German, the author will have chosen Spanish, Japanese, and I don't know, Hindi or whatever. So if the languages are different enough from each other and the author speaks them, then this will give him a sense that everything is going to look okay. So this could be combined with a multi-user interface system where you basically, the author create paragraphs which are later sent to translators for review, and then the translators will send back yeah, this makes sense, or yeah, you need to change the code, and instead of doing it in this Lisp way, doing it this other Lisp way, because what you said makes sense in English, but you're missing this other thing you need to do in Hindi so that it makes sense, or whatever. Still, my point is that using collaboration, the authors could co-create a Lisp style thing. So the reason I'm suggesting Lisp is because it's easy to parse. But if we add to this idea, then the concept of Perl 6 grammars, Mars. I don't know how to spell grammars. I'm sorry, guy. English is not my first language, so just bear with me. So still, if we add programmers to this idea, then what we get is that maybe it doesn't have to look like Lisp. Maybe it can look like something else. So you see, my problem here is not to translate, because translation, as we saw before, is impossible. And my problem here is not to disambiguate. So disambiguation is also impossible. So I'm not even gonna try. So my problem is just, can a language be created when authors can express their thoughts in a very logical and like organized way, so that using the Perl 6 grammars they can express it in a nice like language that lets them indicate that what's the verb, what's the indirect object, what's the direct object, and just mostly it's how things like how things are organized. So you see, like in this case, it could be as easy as just letting the authors just do this, and this can be enough for the parser to go, oh yeah, I get it, and then it will just automatically generate this kind of expression here, which will later be converted into, well, into the correct translation. So what I'm proposing is one system for people to communicate and store knowledge that is non-ambiguous. So it is a human language, but at the same time, it is a human language designed for computer to understand non-ambiguously. And if you could write a book this way, then yeah, it's gonna be harder to write the book. Like, I get it, it's gonna be hard. But at the same time, you're not really doing the effort for one book. You're doing the effort, and what you're gonna get out is 10 books at once. So you're gonna be able to publish French, German, Japanese, like whichever renderers we write, you're gonna be able to just publish in 10 languages at once, at the beginning. And you're gonna do this by a fraction of the cost of actually like having humans take all your words and just like mistranslate them, or just like do something like this. So the point of this idea, of course, is just to just throw the idea around, so that you guys maybe can tell me, is this a good idea, bad idea, should I do it, should I abandon it? Because like, I'll be honest guys, this idea is gonna be a lot of work. Like, it's not just like, oh yeah, just do everything like Lisp and it's easy. No, it's probably gonna be like really hard to do. But I think it's worth it, because if humans can just store their knowledge not in a language of a particular region of the world, but rather in like a truly universal, non-ambiguous language, then that will let the knowledge of the world continue to live even after some particular forms of the language have disappeared or have changed, because the text can be re-rendered into newer versions of itself. So if you consider text to be a database that is symbolically manipulable, then we will have a way to manipulate ideas symbolically, and also maybe find, like, assuming we have a lot of books written this way, we could later like have databases and like search who else is doing this idea, or who else said this, or like who has the same structure kind of deal. Now, I know that there are limitations to this idea. For instance, this similar to idea that I write here to indicate like, maybe this is not what, like, I don't want to devolve into a language that people have to memorize and it's really hard. But at the same time, I know that the word like, just the word, replacing this for like may be like super hard. So I think like auto-completion is going to be important. But if you consider the syntax of the language to be like, of this language to be very precise, where you can only fit some certain holes in some certain buckets, then it should be easy to offer autocomplete that actually doesn't offer every word in existence, but just a set of words. So, of course, creating these Lisp expressions will be hard. So one of the ideas I have in order to alleviate the pain of actually doing all this stuff is basically to offer the authors a user interface, and this is like a different user interface, where the authors write in English. So I will say English, 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 English. And then whatever was written, then there is a Google NLP API that will automatically parse it into a tree. But then the author can see the creation of this sentence in real time as he types. And then if the author sees that the creation of the part of speech 3 is mistaken, then the author should be able to just like basically drag and drop these things around, like just maybe just take the 3 and just like whoop, just drag this in the right way, or maybe just add a comma here and see how the whole thing changes, so that he can see that the computers understood exactly what he meant in real time by editing the 3. And editing the 3 will basically insert like invisible grouping characters here in order to tell the parsers like, hey, you should parse this, but like these things is like together in a way. So if the authors could see in real time what's going to happen, then it will be easier for them to actually generate what they meant to say. And an author, and in this different example, if an author can write these things, and like maybe all these 3 interfaces can be like just one thing where person types in English, and then this lispy thing is auto-generated, which is represented as 3 or as, as this other thing, and person types in English. These things come out of nowhere, but I can edit them, and then after I edit them, then these real-time translations, they look good. And if they look good, I go like, yep, this looks good, this looks good, this looks good. Or maybe I can even go and say, no, actually just change this word to this word, change this word to this word. And this one I'm just gonna say, ask for clarification, and then it can be sent to other humans for verification, not clarification. Maybe, yeah, just to make sure everything is cool. But that may reduce the amount of work that needs to be done to translate the human knowledge tremendously. So you see, instead of us having Wikipedia that has like 100,000 articles in English and like 20 articles in like Quechua, we should have a Wikipedia that is represented all the knowledge of the humankind and rendered in every possible human language, so that we will have 100,000 Wikipedia English articles, and also 100,000 Quechua articles, and 100,000 Norwegian, and 100,000 Spanish, and 100,000 French, and like every language will get like the same user interface, the same convenience. So instead of me telling my coworker friends in India, hey, you need to learn English because the whole internet is in English, I will just tell them, you know what, the problem is that the way we're storing knowledge like kind of sucks. So let me just rewrite everything in Lisp so that you can actually read it as well, because it's not fair that I'm just favoring just the particular group of people who happen to coincidentally be descendants of the people who invaded other countries culturally and economically 300 years ago, which is like that's not your fault. It's not my fault that it happened. Like, it just happened, but it shouldn't be the way we assign the importance to a language. Like, I really like English, but it's not the language. It's not the only language out there. And there's a lot of people who are really smart. They're really bright. They're full of energy, and they're young, but they can't read any of the literature. Like, for instance, they can't read the Perl documentation because they only speak Norwegian, or they only speak Russian, or they only speak, I don't know, Swahili or whatever. So we should be able to bring all this knowledge to them by changing the way we write the books themselves. And so that's the idea. I hope you guys now, I apologize for not being clear enough about the idea at the beginning, and I would like to know your feedback and recommendations in this new challenge I have set for myself.